A Quinnipiac University poll now gives President Biden the lowest mark since he took office. His approval rating plummeting to a dismal 33%. And those surveyed also gave him a thumbs down when it comes to handling the big issues of the day, the economy, foreign policy, and COVID. Plus, the headlines, not kind to the president. They warn about his stalled agenda and highlight the fears the Democrats now have about the upcoming midterm elections, where the party is in danger of losing control of Congress. Yet the president doesn't seem to be changing anything about his strategy, especially when it comes to COVID. Just moments ago, a short time ago, he vilified people who have chosen not to get the vaccine again.
I've been saying that as we remain in this pandemic. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And I mean by this, right now, both vaccinated and unvaccinated people are testing positive. But what happens after that could not be more different. If vaccinated people test positive, they overwhelmingly have either no symptoms at all or they have mild symptoms.
Douglas, when you hear facts and people come back with something that doesn't quite fit, like we know that whether you're vaccinated or not, you're exposed to Omicron. You're hoping to mitigate that with a vaccine. The president instead just keeps poking the bear and pointing fingers at people making the decision that they've made.
That's right. By the way, I'm surprised he's making as good figures as he is in the approval ratings at the moment.
33%.
I'm surprised.
That's terrible.
I'm surprised he's riding that high.
Wow.
I mean, this is a president who, apart from anything else, has been dodging the media, dodging accountability for months now. In any other democracy, this wouldn't be acceptable. You have a commander-in-chief who will not answer basic questions about his decisions. His views and his policies don't get a chance to get gone over by the media. I mean, most other democracies don't work like this. You know, the president would get held accountable. And he just repeatedly makes statements, incredibly inflammatory statements, incredibly inflammatory speeches like the one earlier this week, and there's no accountability. And, you know, he said, remember, his great pitch for becoming president was that he was going to be the great unifier and that his predecessor had been the great divider. But he has kept using speeches and statements, such as he makes them, to divide America still further. Look at the stuff on voting reform this week. It was basically, either you're with me or you're a Nazi. You know, is that the talk of unification?
You know, Kayleigh, last hour on the Faulkner Focus, I counted 4 times where unification was where people were teeing off on the president. And I hear it again from Douglas now, and it's almost like we need to hear from the president on who he wants to be now, because who he's presenting is completely oppositional now to who he said he was going to be in office, which I guess is why Senator McConnell says, I don't know who that guy was.
Yeah, he gave his inauguration speech and used some version of the word unity like half a dozen times. This is the most divisive president I have seen in the last 2 decades, especially when you look at the numbers. When you drill down into them, that Quinnipiac poll, the left-wing poll, he's decided to pivot to division. I agree with Douglas Murray. That speech that he gave was one of the most divisive I have heard, saying if you oppose the federalizing of elections, if you oppose it, you are essentially a segregationist. Meanwhile, his vaccine message is the unvaccinated have a right to be angry at the vaccinated. This is division, 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 and Americans are noticing it because in Quinnipiac, asked is he uniting us or dividing us, 49% said dividing, 42% said unifying. So Americans are recognizing the strategy, and I hope the administration's recognizing the 5-alarm fire they have on their hands with Quinnipiac, left-wing polling organization who said Andrew Gillum was going to be the governor of Florida. He's not. It's Ron DeSantis. But that poll, left-wing poll in my view, showing 33% approval. I was stunned when I saw that and had to double check the numbers. That's a 5-alarm fire. It's going to invite primary challengers and probably more than one, if I had to guess.
Kayleigh, just to quickly kind of double down with my questioning on this, because I am curious, when do you really start paying attention to polling? I mean, you've been in a White House before, so you know, yeah, maybe 1 or 2, maybe a couple of months. I mean, this has been a stubborn slog in the numbers for this president for months now.
Yeah, anyone who says they're not looking at the polls in that administration, and Biden has said that, is deceiving you. They are looking at the polls. What you are seeing is absolute panic in the White House. It's why they're desperately trying to get something passed on the Hill. It's why they're pivoting to this voting rights agenda that is just sowing division in the messaging that they're creating. It's getting worse and worse for them. They say they're not looking at polls. Harris, take my word. They are looking at the polls. How could you not with 33% approval?
You know, Emily, when I think about what the administration and the White House and the president should do next in terms of meeting these numbers with a message, I am confused, conflicted about what that message should be. Like, where do you start?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to be honest, I don't know. It's sort of like walking into an abandoned, falling down haunted house, and you're like, I don't even know where to start with a renovation. But you know what, Harris? Who cares? With the exception of the fact that this is our commander-in-chief who is absolutely reprehensible in the dereliction of duty. Let's just put that aside for a second, because the Republicans are coming for him. And that's the strong messaging. That's the unified messaging that people are following. So, for example, the National Republican Campaign Committee, they reported that this year they didn't just break records of fundraising in an off-election year. They blew it out of the water. They report a $17.9 million haul just last month. They brought in over $140 million in 2021. And that's just not in the macro, on the micro sense. For example, Kevin McCarthy, he brought in a whopping $11.75 million in donations and fundraising. In just Q4, $72.4 million this cycle. So here's the thing.
Big cash.
Regardless what the Democrats think that they are doing, and the messaging, the confusion that they're putting out in the media, the things that they think people care about, Americans know what they care about, and that is putting food on the table, job security, safety at our border, safety in their streets, and protection to earn the livelihood that protects their families. And those are the things that are lending them to put their money where their mouths are, and that's with the Republican Party right now.
Yeah, the chairwoman of the RNC and I talked this week about those numbers. And if you saw Tommy just a few moments ago, Kevin McCarthy at the lectern talking at a news conference about what really should be the things to focus on, as Emily just laid out. I mean, you only raise more money when you promise to actually come up with solutions to all the crises that are out there, I would imagine.
And I do believe, contrary to everybody else in the panel, I do believe that Joe Biden is a great unifier. I believe that he is unifying not only Republicans, but I believe he is unifying the American people against this woke, do-nothing agenda of his administration. I think even the most leftist of the lefties, I think that they are starting to see the light, and that is why Democrats are panicking. Democrats are also coming together and unifying against this president. As I've said before on this program, I believe what is going to happen, and we're already seeing it, is Democrats are going to distance themselves not only from Joe Biden, but from Kamala Harris. They're not going to distance themselves from the agenda because it is their agenda to begin with, but they will distance themselves from Joe and Kamala because they're going to make it seem like those two are the only problems. You saw that with Stacey Abrams just the other day. She probably has aspirations for 2024. We're even seeing it with Al Sharpton coming out and criticizing Joe Biden. Democrats are going to attempt to gaslight the American people into believing it is just Joe and it is just Kamala, but it's more than that. It is their agenda. It is their party that is the problem. And the American people as a whole, Republican and Democrat, would do well to remember that in the midterms and especially in 2024.
You point out something that is so important just in terms of looking at the landscape ahead, and that is the fact that it is their agenda. And he's not carrying the flag the way that many would want. Look, we're still waiting to hear back from Fair Action, that political action committee by Stacey Abrams, to see what conflict on her schedule would be more important than the key issue for her and a visiting president. We haven't heard back from them.
Frankly,
I'm not holding my breath on that. But, you know, you bring up such a great point, Tommy, just in terms of how they plan down the road. Who can you count on and who can't you count on? Apparently not the people in the White House. Douglas, I want to give you the last word.
Well, I mean, I'm just, stunned by this because, as I say, we're a short way into this presidency and it's been unraveling from the get-go. The question now is, how much worse can it get? And when the point is that the Democrats realize how far underwater they are and start to try to change things, but it is not going to be easy for them.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.